So I'm a behavioral scientist passionate about helping practitioners and organizations and policymakers to create positive behavioral change, from increasing the number of organ donor registrations to decreasing the number of customers who are delinquent on their credit card debt. And I think over the last 15 years or so, behavioral scientists have done an amazing job creating awareness for the field of behavioral science and its insights about how humans are boundedly rational, the various heuristics and biases, and how to overcome or mitigate some of them. I'm thinking in particular of popular books such as Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, or Dan Ariely's Predictably Irrational, Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein's Nudge book. And I believe that they have all done an amazing role. They have played a major role in the achievement of that, and have undoubtedly also played a major role in influencing the creation of behavioral science teams, whether it's within governments or in organizations. And I also think it's very easy for us to see why, because the behaviors and solutions that are described in these bestsellers are often entertaining and also quite intuitive. I think each one of us can relate to many of their stories. For example, many of us have experienced wanting to exercise and failing to do so. And it's not hard to imagine how pre-committing, let's say $10 to a cause we do not like every time when we fail to exercise may be a good motivator to exercise. And so all this is good. And I think we have really made a lot of progress as a field. But I also think that we are, as behavioral scientists right now, at a critical juncture. I think we are running the danger of the promise of behavioral science being an illusion for many practitioners, because as a field, we have been biased to simplify and highlight successes. And I think applying behavioral science in the real world is a much more complex endeavor than behavioral scientists have traditionally conveyed. And so I believe it's time to create a more realistic and balanced view of the promise of behavioral science, and to highlight the limitations and the nuances, and also work on how we can overcome some of those. And that is basically what I have spent time on thinking over the last few years and what I've been working on. And in fact, I also think that it's our responsibility as behavioral scientists to do so if we truly believe that behavioral science can be a useful and low-cost tool in the practitioner's toolbox to create positive behavioral change, and if we really want to have that kind of impact. So what exactly do I mean when I was saying creating a more balanced view? I think as a first step, we need to acknowledge and create awareness among practitioners, in particular about three things. So one is there is a publication bias. I think the reality is that large and positive effects are more likely to be published than small or null effects, or studies that come to the opposite conclusion than what was intended. And the reality is also that it's much harder to publish replications or applications of the same concepts of interventions in different domains. And experiments are also often run on selected participants that are particularly nudgeable, because as scientists, we often try to provide a proof of concept. And this creates a biased view, not only on the robustness, but also of the size of effects that practitioners can expect. And this last point in particular has recently been made apparent by Stefano Della Vigna and Elizabeth Linos, who have actually found that the average effect of behavioral science interventions in academic papers are about 4 times bigger than the average effect of behavioral science interventions when applied by practitioners in the real world. So the first one is publication bias. The second is the reality of that there is a research bias. So behavioral science experiments and peer-reviewed papers are primarily run in the US, or at least in the Western world, and so far have been mainly driven by effect. So we haven't really examined what are the actual underlying reasons why people are not behaving the way that we believe would be the better way. So is it a lack of motivation? Is it a lack of trust? Is it a lack of information? Is it sludge? Is it that the social norms just don't seem right? And on top of that, when we publish papers, the details of the implementations are often missing or are not readily accessible. So, example, at what time of day was the experiment done or the intervention tested? How exactly was the information presented? Who were the participants? How were they recruited? And also things such as like, what were the interventions compared to assess if they were successful? And because of all this, it's not necessarily clear how generalizable academic findings may be across different systems, across different cultures. And we also are not necessarily that clear about what are the requirements that are necessary ultimately for their success. And that would bring me also to my third point, which is that contextual details really matter. And that's why it is important to convey to practitioners that it is key to do small-scale testing in the context in which the interventions will be used. And just simply applying off-shelf solutions is probably less likely to work. And in a recently published book, a former colleague of mine, Dilip Soman, and I, we have brought together behavioral science experts from academia as well as from the practitioner world to do exactly that. So our aim was to present the knowledge that we have accumulated so far on what works, when, and how in terms of some of those most prominent interventions, such as reminders or social norms, as well as actually within specific domains, because that's often what, from my experience, practitioners, whether it's in organizations or on the government sides, really care about. So interventions that worked, for example, in the domain of financial decision-making or sustainability or diversity, equity, and inclusion, health, or misinformation, the big topics at the moment. So that's what we were trying to aim for in this book. And in addition, we also asked a few experts to really focus on the challenges when implementing behavioral science, also in low-income populations, and in particular the Global South, and what to look out for when translating the science also from the non-digital world, where most experiments to date have been run, and translating them to the digital world. So at the end of the day, I really believe that behavioral science has the ability to tackle social and business problems. I think behavioral science really has a big role to play here. But that said, if we aim to transplant ideas from the lab or a controlled setting into the wild and translate findings from one context to an entirely different one and scale up interventions also to a larger group or an entire population with all its heterogeneity, it is really crucial that we pay attention to the nuances of the science of how to use behavioral science in order to achieve the positive behavior change. And that's basically it. That's what my passion is, and that's what I've been working on for the last few years. And I'm very excited in being a part of that journey.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
You can. Hi, it's Des again. I should have mentioned, you are the joint editor of the book, Behavioral Science in the Wild, I believe. That's the book you referred to, I think.
That's right, that's right.
Yeah, and that's available in all good bookshops?
I hope so. Should be.
Okay, that's good. So we've got a couple of questions for you very quickly. But I should say that we've got people joining this session from Poland, Ireland, Turkey, South Africa, France, all over America, North America, the US, India, even someone from Oxford in the UK, Saudi Arabia, Spain, Greece, Malaysia. So we're very global.
I like that.
Yeah, what is the most commonly desired, this is a question that's come in, what is the most commonly desired behavioral science topic challenge that is of interest to your clients in your consulting company?
Oof, what is the most,
or a particularly relevant topic that you get asked about?
I think really at the moment there is a lot of interest in how to combat misinformation, how to help with digital literacy among individuals, also from an organizational perspective, in particular from an internal work process perspective, how to support DEI efforts, and then a little bit also on the sustainability side. But those are really the big subject themes, I would say, that clients are very interested in these days.
Okay. And are you optimistic about what behavioral science can do in terms of social change?
I am. I think it has a lot of promise, but as I laid out, I think we are really at a juncture. I think it's really important that we start being more honest on what behavioral science can do, what it cannot do. It is one tool in the toolkit. It is not the only tool in a toolkit. I think it's very important that we bring in insights of what we know about how humans act. I mean, we are not often as rational, right? And so bringing that understanding to the table, where you often have economists and politicians and maybe lawyers, I think this is really important. But if we are not truthful about when really behavioral science works and how big effects are, and if we are not explaining this to practitioners better, then I think we are not really using the full potential that behavioral science has to offer.